The Reformed Rake Reimagined, Romance's Alpha Male Makeover. Today I wanted to discuss something that I think is both fascinating and potentially a little provocative. It's how the alpha male has survived and thrived in modern romance fiction. You would think that in a world where we talk about feminism, consent, power imbalances, and emotional intelligence, that the days of the dominating, emotionally unavailable, controlling man as a romantic fantasy would be long gone, right? Spoiler, he never left. He actually just got better at PR. The rake isn't dead, he's just wearing different pants. So let's start with a little history. Back in the day, think the 70s and 80s, romance novels were full of bodice rippers. If you go back to the, historical fiction and even the Harlequins, these were intense historical stories where the male love interest was often aggressive, physically aggressive as well as verbally, dominant, and frankly, not big on asking for consent. There were usually frequently some pretty big power imbalances: doctor, nurse, boss, secretary, teacher, student. Those were different times. Anyway, back in the day, those books sold like wildfire. And yet, we fast forward to now. You'd think we'd moved on. As a culture, we say we value emotional depth, mutual respect, and sensitivity in our romantic ideals. But somehow, the most popular romance tropes still revolve around certain areas. Now, I'm not talking about the fringe romance because, of course, there is romance out there that's blatantly non consensual, dubious consent. There's dinosaur porn, there's tentacle porn. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about notionally mainstream romance. Still has certain themes. And if you take a look at these categories of romance, you'll see what I mean. There's the billionaire romance category, because of course millionaires aren't rich enough anymore. It has to be billionaires. So we've got billionaires who use power and wealth as seduction tools. We have bully romances. They're actually called bully romances, where cruelty masks obsession and deep down love. We have athletes whose aggression is part of their allure. And we have rock stars who are basically a walking, emotionally chaotic red flag with tattoos. In my mind, it is the same fantasy, but it's in new packaging. The powerful, hard to love man who is changed, not by therapy, not by personal growth, but by her, by you, and by love. So, why are we still into this? This is where, for me, it gets really interesting from a psychological perspective. Because let's be honest, it is not politically correct to want a Cinderella story anymore. It is not empowered to fantasize about being rescued by a rich man. It is not feminist to crave dominance or submission dynamics. And it's definitely not woke to fall in love with someone who treats you badly because he had a tragic childhood. Or, worse, he got treated really bad by his previous girlfriend who gave him really twisted ideas around consent. And yet, we as romance readers are still into it. Yes, I'm lumping myself into this category because I read some of these romances as well. Like, I don't really like the bully category, but I'm definitely guilty of reading. I've read hockey romance, I have read rock star romance. Like I said, I don't like bully romance and I really don't like billionaire romance, but I dabble as well. So anyway, as I said, romance readers are still into it. We're just much more subtle about it now. So we wrap the fantasy in layers of emotional trauma, first person perspectives, and backstory so that we can justify the bad behavior. Now, I'm not judging it. Honestly, I don't think we should be judging it. People's fantasies are really complicated. They're messy. Sometimes they're extremely contradictory. What we crave in fiction doesn't always line up with what we want in real life, and that is okay. That's the whole idea of fantasy. But what I'm really interested in is how the romance genre is so clearly showing us that conflict and how hard we as readers and the romance authors as writers are trying to sort of reconcile these really contradictory parts of what we want. We don't want to admit that we want the alpha to take control. So now he's traumatized. Now he's secretly soft. Now we're in his head and we can see that he's not actually a jerk. He's just broken. And that is the justification that lets us indulge in the fantasy without guilt. We then have, in a lot of modern romances, the POV flip. Enter the emo alpha. A big part of how romance has reshaped the alpha male is through dual first person POVs in our stories, particularly in contemporary and new adult subgenres of romance. Instead of only seeing through the heroine's eyes, we now get full access to his thoughts as well, and his brain. And let's just say, it's intense. It's often written with a lot of hormones and just enough emotional damage to make his obsessive behavior seem almost sweet. He's not just attracted, he's obsessed. He doesn't just want her, he needs her. He wants to own her, protect her, and ruin her for other men. Half the time his inner monologue reads something like, I shouldn't want her, but I do. I'd kill for her. I'd burn the world down if she cried. And that's a lot. In real life, if we came across someone like that, we'd probably tell our friend to block his number, call the police, take out an AVO. At the very least, we would run for the hills because he clearly needs therapy. But as romance readers, it gives us access to his vulnerability. It turns the alpha into something that's very safe to desire because we understand him. We see him. He's vulnerable. And look, it's compelling. It's dramatic. It taps into deep emotional stakes that romance does so well. But also, those guys don't actually exist. I mean, my brother is an emotionally intelligent, kind, and thoughtful guy. My husband, same. He's warm, supportive, loving. He's fully capable of expressing himself in words and actions without sounding like a possessive caveman on the verge of a breakdown. And yet, the male voice that we get in romance novels is often this really bizarre mashup. Sentences that are either one word grunts or paragraphs of unfiltered emotional spirals. They're deeply possessive and emotionally stunted. They oscillate between ugga ugga must mate energy and hyper-neurotic emo poetry. It is a very hyper-real fantasy version of masculinity that is not grounded in how real men actually talk or think, but how women seem to imagine an emotionally tortured man would sound if he had the vocabulary of a Tumblr poet and the sex drive of a Roman gladiator. In the same way that we criticize how male authors write with the male gaze when they write about women, women are exactly as bad frequently in these romance novels when they write about men. I remember in my book club, some of the guys were quite shocked when they read Fourth Wing because they were kind of like, oh, I now see how women feel when they read the male gaze because the female gaze is kind of confronting as well and not grounded in reality. And I said, yeah, absolutely. And anyway, don't even get me started on how male characters talk to each other in these books. It's like the authors think, okay, how do men talk? Yep, there's going to be constant swearing, dick jokes, and random fights. It's so obviously written like someone trying very hard to perform masculinity through dialogue. I'm not saying that it's bad, it's just that it's not real. If you read one of these romances, you'll see, there's so much over the top representations of cliched masculinity, swearing and dick jokes and then they weave through all these sensitive new age discussion topics about love and sometimes it's really strange. So anyway, honestly, it's okay. It's not meant to be real. It's meant to feel like an emotionally satisfying fantasy, and for a lot of readers, it totally hits the mark. But it's also kind of hilarious when you step back and you think about it. And I suppose it could be dangerous if you go out thinking that this is a healthy, well adjusted male that you want to marry, because honestly, you really wouldn't. So, context makes fantasy believable. Modern romance stories also work so hard to justify the alpha's behavior through setting and profession. So, for instance, if he's a professional athlete, then aggression is part of the job. If he's a billionaire, his control freak tendencies are just business. If he's a rock star, his self destructive habits are artistic and creative expression. And that's what makes it palatable. We don't have to feel weird or guilty about being attracted to an emotionally intense man with an 8 pack because his abs are functional. He needs them to do his job. He's not a vain and narcissistic gym junkie who'll have no time for his woman. He's a modern day gladiator. Then there's this amazing trick happening. We're allowed to enjoy a fantasy without feeling bad about it because the story gives us just enough plausibility to feel like it's realistic. So, final thoughts in relation to desire versus acceptability. The takeaway is romance fiction, especially the kinds that dominate Kindle Unlimited and BookTok, it's not just about love stories. It's about fantasies that are socially unacceptable being made emotionally digestible. It's clear that as romance readers, many of us still want the alpha male. We still want the Cinderella arc. We still want power and danger and obsession and heat. We just want it wrapped up in feelings, sprinkled with trauma, and served with a side of emotional redemption. And honestly, maybe there's something kind of beautiful about that because people are complex, desire is complicated, and I feel like romance novels at their best are a place where those contradictions can play out without shame or judgment.